Welcome to my podcast, Today's Dream, Tomorrow's Reality. My name is Vickie Poole. I'm a master transformational coach and hypnotist specializing in habit change. And this podcast is sponsored by the Enlightened Peach. And it's all about embracing our mosaic life. And some of you may ask, what is a mosaic life anyway? Well, it is recognizing that all the pieces of our life, the good, the bad, the indifferent, maybe even the ugly sometimes, have all come together to make us who we are. Change any one thing, and we are different. With that in mind, I invite you to embrace your perceived imperfections and celebrate who you are. This podcast is unedited and raw, just like life. And I am your host, and I have a special guest that I'll introduce in just a moment. And before I do that, I would love to ask you to do me a solid, and that is to leave a comment. And always remember to like, subscribe, and share. So now let's get started. So this lovely lady right here is Laura Ahern. I said it correctly,
You
right?
sure did.
Oh, yay, yay. And
Thank you.
so I'm going to let her just tell you just a little touch about her, but I'm going to share before I do that we don't really know each other. We were connected by someone else, and this podcast resonated with her. And so I am so excited about having her here and hearing a lot more about what she does. So take it away, Laura.
Vickie, I'm so appreciative of being here with you today and also the space that you hold for this to unfold organically, because that is life, right? And it is the unexpected parts of life that really challenge us to become the things we're meant to be. And so, a little bit about me, my background, the thing that really led to my own personal awakening was that I was widowed at 29 years old.
Mm,
And in a moment, my whole future, everything I had invested in and believed in and loved and really thought was ahead of me was suddenly gone. And it's that point in time where everything could have taken over, right? Pain, devastation, just kind of giving up could have happened. And through my own really special journey of discovering that all challenges in life can truly serve our highest good, and believing with conviction in that, right? Even when things seemed impossible, I really did start to discover the limitlessness of our human potential. And now in my career, I have been fortunate enough to discover my own true calling, and to be able to help others discover the true meaning of their experiences, their true calling in their life. So it's really the ability to navigate and embrace the things that we've been given that allots us this kind of building of our spiritual muscles so we can discover what we're really made of. So that's why I resonated with your podcast so much. It's a little bit of background about me, how I got here.
yeah, and it looks like that must be the book, a book you've written in the behind you there.
Yeah, yeah. So my book is called The True Calling, Discover Your Power to Live a Life of Meaning. And it really goes through the depth of my journey, and what I've devised, which is called the True Method, which really helps people to transform their limitations, their pains, to embrace having joy in their life, to reclaim becoming that unique version of them and discover that they actually do have something that's calling them, right? Our challenges that face us don't just happen by chance. They're
Right.
very curated actually for what our soul has called in. And it can be almost unacceptable in the moments when we're faced with them to face that reality. But that is really my whole journey. I've spent the last 10 years since I was widowed really discovering not just my own healing path, but what we're really made of and what's available to us. And that is what really led to the creation and the writing of my book was this really inspired channeled guidance that I received around how can I help alleviate suffering for others? How can I help them to discover that their challenges truly do serve them and that they can leverage that to have the life that they truly not only desire, but they deserve to be living.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. I love it. I love how well you articulate that. That is amazing. I will say
Thank you.
many, many times that's where I falter is being able to articulate my thoughts in the way that it is received,
I
um
know.
so I love that about you, but I would like to kind of go back in time a little bit with you, if you don't mind.
I
So
don't at all. Let's do it.
before your significant other passed away,
Yeah.
what was life like then?
Life was quite routine. It was very much, it was great for the vision I had. So, and the reason I'm explaining it that way is that it was societally normal. I was in school at that time. I was seeking my psychology degree. I was working managing dental offices. I was very successful on the surface of, I had a great person. We got married. We had a home, right? It was like checking all of those boxes.
Hmm. Did you have
Um,
the white picket fence and the dog too?
yeah, we had a big old fence, two dogs, property, we had it.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, there were still these moments of rising, of feeling unfulfilled. And it was like, well, if all of this external stuff isn't making me happy, what is it that I'm seeking? And all at once, it kind of came, I don't want to say came crashing down, because it almost came like lifting up, all of the things kind of unraveled at the same time that led me to on to this challenging path for myself and this discovery. But yeah, life was quite normal. It was kind of a life that most people get kind of stuck in the pattern of just like
Hmm.
wake up, go to work, have my weekends. We're all dying for our weekends and time
Yeah.
off and just cutting loose, right? And so it was very routine. It was a normal life.
Yeah. So your spouse, how did they pass?
Yeah, so Josh it was really interesting because we had dated for 5 years before we were married. And about 4.5 months after we were married, he had a seizure out of the blue. And it was such a traumatic experience because I didn't even know what it was. I had never seen anything like it. And I called 911. We got him to the hospital, and it was then that they diagnosed him with having a stage 4 brain tumor, and
Oh,
they gave him
wow.
9 months to live.
Wow.
So
That
it
is
went
quick.
from forever to I don't really have that choice. And what's really interesting about that, Vicki, is that there's a lot of times in which um, we expect, because it's kind of the norm, like we talked about the normal life, we have this sense that we're entitled to this like big long life that it's going to be. And we get really caught up on the little mundane things that don't matter, like frustration and I'm not going to deal with this forever, And then it was like this awakening moment of, oh, I don't actually have the choice
Yeah.
to get to deal with this forever. And so it really is a shock to realize how precious life is.
Yeah.
And we easily forget that when we just kind of allow ourselves to be in this patterned way of existing. But that was the moment. He had never spent a day in the hospital really since the day he was born. And so it was literally the last thing that we would have ever expected. And I mean,
So did he live for 9 months, or was he able to
he
go
lived for
longer?
14 months.
Okay.
We actually experienced some really significant both miracles and devastation. And what I discovered through my own journey so it was really sweet, Vicki, because you complimented me on my ability to articulate. And what I'm not sure if you know, is that professionally I'm known as the energy linguist. And
Okay.
part of that reason is because I'm able to translate invisible energy into conscious comprehension to allow people to really apply whatever it is, whether it's what's happening within themselves or spiritual messages, into something that's applicable for them to have clarity on their path and really navigate to their highest potential. And the
Very
reason that
cool.
thank you. The reason that I share on that, and I'm kind of losing where I was, I guess, with the question you had asked.
Just keep going. We'll come
Okay.
back to whatever.
Um, yeah, this is real
You know
life,
how that
everybody.
is.
This is what's beautiful.
I
We're
like
just
to
gonna
say
flow
it's
with
like
it.
we're sitting on the sofa in my living room and we're just having a chat with a cup of tea or a glass of wine. So
Mm,
whatever comes up, comes up. I mean,
I
in
love
a
it.
regular conversation, you wouldn't stop and say, wait a minute, what was I talking about over there? No, you just keep on
I
going,
might. I
right?
have a lot of thoughts in my head.
Me as
This
well,
is
me as
real.
well. I will say I go off on tangents sometimes, and then sometimes I'll remember, oh, I was talking about that, and then I'll come back. But yeah,
Absolutely. And
keep
I'm sure
going.
it'll do that, right?
Yeah,
It all comes full circle.
right.
And I shared that. I forget why I was sharing on that actually. Because we were talking about uh
You were talking about the fact that he had lived for 14
Oh
months.
yeah. So the energy lingo. So the reason that I share
Yeah.
that is what happened after Josh passed away was that really that state of grief, of immense grief, really did numb a lot of my intellectual facilities. Like it was just such a shock
Hmm.
to navigate, and I think that is the very reason why my innate intuitive abilities really came online is because it kind of shut down that over analyzing and that logical part a little bit. And through that, I was able to discover things about the experience that we had navigating his journey that I don't think I would have otherwise seen it as. So I see energy, I see the way it moves, and I'm very passionate about like our neurowiring, like our minds, and what a
Hmm.
powerful role that plays. And so to answer your question, so he lived for 14 months. And when I discovered the miracles we experienced along with the devastation that we experience, it all comes down to the power of our minds. It was at his 10-month visit that a tumor that they said would never shrink, would only get bigger, that we would be lucky to keep it where it was at, where it was actually not even, you couldn't see it on the scan at all.
Wow,
So he was supposed to be
nice.
dead a whole month later or earlier, and here he was, right, alive, and there was no trace of it really. This is the kicker, Vickie, is that he didn't know he had 9 months to live. When we got that diagnosis, he was in the SICU recovering. And it was like this huge lightning bolt of awakening within me where I was just like, we will tell him the diagnosis so we can deal with that, but we are not going to tell him the prognosis because you tell him he has 9 months to live and he's going to be gone in 4.
Yeah, yeah,
And it was this ferociousness of just like, nobody is allowed in this room to see him until you get your emotions in check and you understand you are not to tell him about that
yeah.
deadline. And it was that very piece of the puzzle that, I mean, he showed up with such joy and um, courage and just this dedication to be well. And part of it is because somebody else didn't tell him that it wasn't possible.
Yeah.
Um, there was a lot that happened in between that last 4 months. In fact, somebody very close to us did end up telling him after the fact of what that prognosis was. And I can't say, I mean, that's a whole
Yeah,
another
yeah.
rabbit
Can
hole in
I share
itself.
something really quick?
I would love that.
Um, I have she's a cousin that she had an aneurysm during childbirth, and the doctors said that they could either save her or they could save the baby. And her husband said, save her.
Yeah.
A lot of people said save the baby. Well, what the doctors ended up doing was they saved the baby. So she ended up going into a coma.
Mm.
And she was in a coma for a very long time. If I lose track of it, but I'm sure she was in a coma for at least a year because we had a couple of holidays that we would go and be there at the hospital, right?
Wow.
But my uncle, who was my mentor most of the time, because he was a brilliant, brilliant man, and he was really into the thoughts and the feelings about things, right? And so he told the nurses that under no circumstances were they to have the TV playing while she was there,
Mm.
that they were not going to have her in her mind thinking that the drama on the screen was happening in her real life. And
Mm.
so they were not allowed to turn on the TV. They were allowed to play, like he had some music there, they were allowed to play the music, and they were not allowed to talk to her about different things. And they came in, my family did, would come in and talk to her like everything was fine. And so now I will say she survived. Now, was she just like she was when before it happened? No, she was different. But, without him being so definite on you are
Yeah.
not going to do these things, I don't think she would have survived at all, you
Yeah.
know? And so to me, that was very profound. And it was way before I ever started doing any of this kind of work, right?
Yeah.
And then you were talking about your husband passing away. Well, I actually, my second husband, when my when my daughter was 7 and my son was 16, he passed away. Now, we were not married at the time. We had gotten a divorce, but we were dating and trying to work things out.
Mhm.
And so it was like I was all invested in we're going to make this work.
Yeah.
And when I got the call that, he had had his second heart attack and that he was at the hospital, he had been asking me to get married again. And I kept saying, well, no, we haven't worked through all of our stuff, and I can't do it to the kids a second time. So we can't get married until we've got this stuff figured out.
Yeah.
And so I bargained with God all the way to
Mm.
the hospital. If you'll just let him live, I'll get off the fence. We'll get married again. We'll make it work. And I was just all the way to the hospital.
Mhm.
But he passed away.
Mm.
And I will say, I admire you getting into this place of introspection right away. Oh my God, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Maybe it was part of it was because I had these two kids, my
Yeah.
daughter was 7, and one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life was sitting her down and telling her
Yeah.
father had passed away.
Yeah.
And, so it was very traumatic. And
Yeah.
I felt like, I couldn't believe, that all this had happened. And then I blamed him. I blamed me. I did,
Mm.
so it
Oh
was
yeah.
a lot of angst around the whole thing. It's not just the person passes away, but then
It's
you
not.
start being pissed at them,
Yeah.
why weren't you taking care of yourself? Why
Yeah.
were you doing this? And, you
Everything.
know, and then I was the one that was the insurance provider. So then I faulted myself because if I'd went ahead and got married again, then he would have had more insurance and he would have,
Mhm.
so
Oh
it
yeah.
was a whole lot of stuff. And it
Yeah.
took me a very, very long time. And I will say it has been, let's see, how old is my daughter now? It's been 23 years since he passed away. I
Wow.
still cry about it.
Oh yeah.
Um, and the interesting thing is that a lot of times I feel like I've really grown and moved through a lot of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, something will trigger me and I'm right back there,
Yeah. I do.
And so it's anybody that's dealt with grief of any kind. I mean, I
Yeah.
think we want to be in a place where we do our grieving and then we're good,
Yeah.
you know, but that's not life.
Right.
And just like I talk about our mosaic of life, it's those pieces that we've gone through that create who we are. And to be honest with you, if all of those things hadn't happened, I don't know if I would have ever gotten to the place of wanting to be a coach and learning
Right.
hypnosis and doing all the amazing things that I do now.
Yeah.
Not that I'm glad he passed away by any
No.
means,
But he's
but
gladly taking credit for all of it.
yes, 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 yes. So it's like there's so many times I feel like he's there, rooting me on.
Yes.
Um, but it's just you're a lot younger than when he was, let's see, I was 30, 40, I guess, when he passed away. No, that can't be right. I'm thinking, how old am I now?
Yeah. Math is hard.
Isn't it? Especially on the spot,
Yeah,
however
yeah.
many years it's been, it's something that I know it was something that I was supposed to go through.
Yeah.
Um, because I wish I could remember who it is because I listen to so many people and read so many books. There was one that I heard one time, and I'm just going to share this real quick, and then we'll get right back to you.
Oh
Um,
no, I love this.
but one of the things was it was talking about how we have this path, when we come into this life. And
Mm.
so the way they explained it was it's like there's all these souls are at the bus stop and they're about ready to come to Earth.
I could tell you the book.
Okay, you can. What is it? What is it?
It's Sue Morter. It's the energy codes, I believe.
Oh, okay. I guess that's probably it because I do have that book over there.
Yes, please tell it though, because I think
Yeah,
the audience
yeah,
will
and I
appreciate that. The
probably
reason I know that is that is the one spot in that book. I could tell you what chapter it's in and where because
okay. Well,
it
then you might
really
be
hit me.
much better at articulating this than me,
Oh,
because
no,
I'm
you're
telling
gonna
you,
do great.
because when I
You're on
tell it,
it.
it changes every time because I can't remember from one time to the next. I just
Your
remember
way
the
will be
gist, right?
perfect.
Okay. Okay. So it's like there's these different souls sitting at the bus stop and they're just having a conversation, getting ready to go to Earth. And one of them says, "Well, what do you think are you supposed to be going to Earth for?" And she says, "Oh, I'm supposed to be learning humility." And the other one says, "Oh, I'm supposed to be learning forgiveness." And they say, "Oh, when we get there, let's meet up and we'll take
Mhm.
care of that." And
Yeah.
so they do, because going down the street one day, this car runs a red light, hits another car head on, kills all the passengers in the car except for the driver. And the driver of the first car that hit survives.
Mhm.
And the one that got hit, all of their family passed away. They were so angry at this person for hitting them, and now they don't have all this family. And they had to find that forgiveness in their heart to be able to forgive this person who hit them. And
Yeah.
then the other one had to have the humility of, "Oh my gosh, I cannot believe I ran that red light and I did this." And so both of them had a horrific thing happen, but they joined together just like they planned before they ever came to Earth to help each other with what they needed. Did I explain it correctly?
You did it great. Yeah, it's the soul that's saying, I'm gonna need somebody to be that driver,
Yeah,
and they said, I'll be that driver because I'm working on self-forgiveness. It
yeah,
is. It really is that profound. And when we're faced with that within our own life, part of the reason I think it's really hard for us to process beyond the experience is because it's something that's so unacceptable to our hearts.
yeah.
Like there is part of that losing your husband, losing mine, that it's just so unacceptable that we almost feel like if we accept it on any level or even move beyond it on any level, that in some way we're saying it's okay, but it's not
Yeah,
okay with our hearts, right? And so
right. Or that we're not
really,
honoring their memory.
right. So there's this guilt around. And the reason I think I was able to make that shift, like you talked about, so quickly was that I had a lot of really wild spiritual experiences start happening. My late husband Josh started coming through. People I didn't know, people I wasn't seeking would find me and deliver these messages to me in such a profound way that I realized, like, okay, if he's going through these lengths to come through, that there's
So
a
what,
reason
wait, wait,
for
wait,
it.
wait, back up, back up, back up, back up.
Oh, there's a lot.
So what were some of these messages? Just give us a couple.
Oh
And
my
how did they show
God.
up? I'm just really
That
curious.
so what was, and this is a little more lengthy. It's not easy. That's why I kind of skim past
Oh
it, but
man, don't be skimming, man. Come on.
don't leave the good stuff out, right? So,
You can skip
Vicki,
on something else.
it was really wild. So it was less than a month after Josh had passed. And I had a friend, so we were living in Florida, and I had used to live in Rhode Island, and I had a friend who was up there, and he loved Josh. They were like kindred spirits, and he was devastated at his passing. And I had gone up just about a month after Josh passed, just to visit my sister, just to kind of like get away. And I hesitated to reach out to my friend. His name was Joe, because I really didn't. I was afraid to face other people's grief. Like it was
Right.
so hard to carry my own that it just was really hard to even imagine facing somebody else. And I was there for a couple days, and it was the morning I woke up. I was supposed to leave and come home. And I kept thinking to myself, if I'm meant to see him, he'll just reach out. Like it'll happen. And it was that morning, and he reached out to me. And he said, "Hey, where are you?" Now that's an odd question because he didn't know I was traveling. But I said, "Well, actually, I'm in Rhode Island." "When are you leaving?" I said, "Today." And he said, "Well, can you meet for lunch?" And I thought, oh, here we go. And I was like, I'm not going to change plans. I'm not going to make it happen. If he's available, he's available. And I said, "Well, actually, we're going to lunch at this place at this time." And he's like, "I'm clearing my schedule. I'll come." And so we're sitting there at the table and we're looking at the menu, and he just leans over and he said, uh, did Josh have a sister? And I said, yeah. And he said, what was her name? And I said, Beck. And he said, Rebecca. And I said, yeah. And he goes, okay. And I was like, why? And he goes, oh, I'll tell you later. And I was like, oh, no, no, no. There's no later. I'm getting on a plane. Like, you need to tell me now. And what he ended up telling me was he was experiencing these really weird dizzy spells that he kept going to the doctor for. Nobody could tell him what was going on. And so he visited this woman who he'd gone to once before for Reiki. And he went in there. And before he even got through the door, like on the table, she looked at him and she said, you recently lost someone. And so, of course, you got to understand, he's the biggest, he was at that time like the biggest skeptic, you know? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, he was young. And he goes, yes. And he goes, he's drawing me a J. And he's like, okay. And now he's tight-lipped. He's not going to say anything.
Yeah, he
But
didn't
he
want to
ended up
feed
getting,
her.
yeah, exactly. Because it's like, come on, give me a break. And what he proceeded to experience was things that he actually couldn't validate because he didn't know. A lot of the things were things that I only knew. But he came through and she goes, I see him handing a pink rose. A pink rose, does that mean anything to you? And Josh or Joe says, no, if it doesn't mean anything to you, it doesn't make it anything to me. And she says, she paused for a minute and she goes, he's handing the pink rose to Laura. Does that mean anything to you? And he goes, oh, yeah, that's his wife's name. You know, now it was like this, okay. And it really led from there. My sister went kind of like incognito to schedule an appointment with this person, and the same kind of things happened where she spoke about this like J plus L in a heart. And it was something he had carved in the concrete when he poured it when he was building our deck and he poured it in the
Wow.
concrete. Nobody had ever seen it. Nobody ever knew about it, just me. I got home from work one day and he was pouring the concrete and he had carved it in there and it was buried, under dirt. And so I'm getting these messages and I'm like, oh, I went home like a crazy person, like digging out to see it in the concrete, like nobody knew. And so it was all of this validation. And the messages that Josh was bringing through was how much he loved me, talked about exactly what we're talking about, the Sue Morter concept of the bus stop conversation, where he was talking about how we had a contract, right? An
Hmm.
agreement to come back here together. And that, our love was so deep that we chose to go through this together. And that really did give me great comfort in navigating my own grief, because when you start to realize that the depth of grief that you're experiencing is equal to the love that you had, right? The heights of the love you experienced. The question is then, would you have given up that love to avoid that pain?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing Vickie for you.
No,
And
I
I know for
wouldn't.
me, no, I would go through that pain all over again to love him all over again. So then
Yeah.
that is what we're faced with. If you're going to choose to love, this is the real risk. And it does make us stronger, whether we like it or not.
Hmm.
It can. It really does make us whole, right? It's the mosaic. It's the beautiful tapestry of our life. And pain is a part of that. I think, part of the thing I write about a little bit in my book, and it's really part of this concept I really truly believe can help us see our higher calling, is that we're wired, right? Evolutionarily speaking, to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Hmm.
So every time we feel that pain, we contract around it in a way that we just want to like escape it and look at the pleasure. But life is not polarized that way, right? Like the painful experiences are equally meaningful as the joyous experiences. And quite frankly, the joy isn't what we think it is without that contrast, right? With knowing what it feels like to not have that love or to have that pain. And so when we start to look at life in a less polarized way, right? Unpolarized, and saying this pain can actually serve me as much as the joy. It really can open us to accepting that it's actually like my dad says, nobody gets out of here alive. Nobody gets out of here without the pain.
Hmm.
You don't have that depth of love without that pain, is the truth of the matter. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was it was a
And
wild
I've had a lot of guests on my podcast that have had extraordinarily horrific and
Yeah.
difficult things that have happened in their life.
Yeah.
And when I was blown away, when I first started my podcast, like I told you earlier, it was to get my voice out. So I started just talking me, right? And then I would be on Facebook and I would be in a group and somebody would share something of their story. And I'd think, oh my gosh, I've got to talk to them. And so I would send them a message. Would you like to come on my podcast? And the first person that I had on my podcast, now, if you go look, it's not as the first person because there was this snafu later. But anyway, um, he was a diabetic and he was an amputee. And he said, the best thing that ever happened to him was losing his leg because it changed the whole trajectory of his life and all this stuff. And when he said that statement, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
When you can see the worst thing that everybody else would think is the most horrible thing that could happen, when
Yeah.
that can happen to you and you can find the gift in it, oh my gosh, that's when we're talking mosaic, right?
Yeah.
And it was after that I changed my wording about what this was, because that's when it became a mosaic life,
Yeah.
was when I started talking to these people that, like with you, that had your husband pass away, and then you find this beauty in the world and through that. And so it is just, I tell everybody all the time, like I have a group on Facebook that's called Stand Up and Stand Out. And I tell them all the time, that all the things that have happened in our life are there for us, not to us. And when you can find the gift in it, no matter how bad it was, the
Yeah.
gift that was in it, because there's always one, you may have to look really hard to find it, but there's always a gift. It's just getting into the place where you're looking for that gift,
True.
and so it is such a profound thing to meet people like you and some of the other, and well, all the guests that I've had on my podcast, that I'm blown away all the time with the beauty of the human spirit. I mean, it
Hmm.
is amazing,
Oh, yeah,
and
that makes me want to tear up. The beauty of the human spirit is really this unlimited, incredibly
yeah,
beautiful and powerful thing that we behold.
yeah, and it's amazing because I wonder sometimes, how do we get to that place, because somebody else, the same thing
Yeah.
happened to them and they give up and
Yeah.
they don't move forward in life and they can't find any beauty anymore.
I know. Yeah.
And then somebody else, it is the thing that helps them see, oh my gosh, look
Yeah.
how amazing my life is now.
Yes.
And so my wish for everybody is to be able to be on the side of, the gift that came from that, you
Yes,
know, but it may be
I
like
do.
me where it took a while for it to come, but still.
Right. The journey is the journey, though. It's not
Yeah.
about any end destination. It's about who we become on this journey. And what I love that you're talking about is what your heart is speaking to is actually the reason that I wrote The True Calling, is because I felt so intolerant of the suffering. Right?
Yeah.
Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. That's a Buddha quote.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, in the book The True Calling, I have practices for people to go through
Hmm.
to just take the time to kind of break it down so that they can understand how some of the most challenging things in their life have served them, how we can allow our suffering to become our strength, because it really does take this certain level of conviction in believing in it, in order for that to transmute and to heal. Because like you said, it is such a interesting like dichotomy to even consider that I look at Josh's passing and I know that in my heart, it's like this interesting, I would give anything to not have had to lose somebody that young and vibrant. However, I wouldn't change what happened
Right.
because it is the thing that I can't even tell you the number of souls, because I have clients across the globe that I've been able to help literally break free from their own suffering and discover what their higher purpose is and start to live out the way that they're not just loving themselves, but they're serving others. And you look at that ripple effect. I mean, we knew at that bus stop, right, what
Right.
was going to unfold.
I've got to get my
And
book back out and read it again.
yeah, it's in chapter 2.
Chapter
I'll
two.
tell you. I'm
Okay.
gonna text you.
Okay.
I'll tell you right where it is.
All right.
So it is interesting because I know that the reason he came through in spirit the way he did is because it was like, all right, you don't get to stop now. And the thing that really helped me to rise was that I knew in my heart that he would have given anything to continue to be here. And it would have been a disgrace for me to use him as the excuse for me not to move forward. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when he would have given anything to be here. And
Right.
so it had to be that higher perspective of knowing that I was being called into something greater, that this had to be for a purpose. And just like what your husband did for you, like you're free on a level that you've never maybe would have ever been otherwise. And so I do believe that we are just endlessly loved and supported from beyond to really be able to claim the thing that we came here to do. Because we are not just a human, we're not just in a human body, right? We are these endlessly powerful spirits having this experience with one another. And there is just such deep wisdom that we can really extract from our experiences when we're willing to face them. And I will tell you,
Yeah.
Vickie, the hardest part wasn't even the grief of the loss of him. I believe me, that's hard to say because that was so deep and devastating. But what I came to discover was the scariest part of my journey, and the hardest part was actually facing myself. It
Mm-hmm.
was learning to love myself through all of the regrets, through not having somebody else there to tell me it's okay, to tell me I'm forgiven, to tell me that I'm enough. And to have to not love myself in spite of everything that happened to me, but love myself because of the journey
Right.
that I had and the wisdom that I acquired through the things that caused me pain. Because I had a really profound moment where I knew if I wasn't able to face myself and love myself with everything I had gone through, that I was not going to survive, that I wasn't
Yeah.
going to make it. I couldn't live with myself. And that's the real challenge on the journey. Yes, the healing is hard, but it's also facing ourselves and facing our regrets and facing the parts of us that we feel are inadequate in some way and discovering that they're not. They're
Yeah.
actually part of that beautiful experience of ours where we're extracting wisdom. They're meant
Right.
for us.
Yeah. Well, in the time when I had my deepest despair, I mean, because it was like I thought, oh my God, now I'm doing this all by myself, and and faulting myself for so many things.
Yeah.
But I woke up in the middle of the night one night, and I could see him sitting at the foot of my bed, and he patted my foot
Yeah.
and rubbed my leg a little bit, and he said, everything's going to be okay.
Mhm.
You're going to
Yeah.
be all right. The
Yeah.
kids are going to be all right. And it was like I blinked and then he was gone.
Yeah.
But it was so amazing. And then years later, when my daughter was a teenager, she might have even been in her early 20s. I don't know. But we had gone to a new age store that had these tents set up where these people were doing readings and doing all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
And I went there without her to start with. And I just stopped, I'm walking around. I wasn't going to do a doggone thing. And I happened to stop at this one tent. And the lady said, well, come on, sit down. And I sat down and she said, she said, I see a man standing behind you, and he's rubbing your shoulder, he's smiling, and he's wanting you to know that everything's going to be okay. And it was like, what? you know okay. And and she told me a lot more other things, but when I got home I told my daughter, and she said, oh, I want to go. So we went back and she went to see this lady, and the lady told her that that her dad was really, really proud of her. Now, this woman didn't know anything about us, right? That
Yeah.
he was really proud of her, and that every time she was sitting and she was studying and she felt like somebody was looking over her shoulder, that it was him saying, oh my gosh, you're so smart. You're so, you're doing all these things, and I'm
Yeah.
here with you. And I mean, it was such an amazing thing, and it made her feel so much better because, she was 7 when he passed.
Yeah.
So over time, her memories of things get skewed a little
Oh,
bit
yeah.
or gone. And so it was just such a profound experience.
Yeah.
And then recently, one of my friends, she has a podcast that's called The Hidden Gifts of Loss. And she was doing a TED Talk. And so I was doing hypnosis with her to help her with getting in front of the people and on the stage and remembering her lines and doing all the stuff, right? And hers was all about the loss of her mother during COVID. And so one of the things as I was talking to her and I was doing this hypnosis, it suddenly just popped in my head and I said it. Your mom, when you're up on stage, your mom is going to be standing there holding your hand because she's standing beside you right now.
Hmm.
And it was like it just came out, it wasn't anything that was planned. And when we finished with the hypnosis, she was so touched with the fact that I had said that about her mom. And I said, well, she was there. I could feel her. I really couldn't see her, but I could feel she was there. And she told me later that when she did her TED Talk, that she could feel her mother's presence, just like I told her
Oh,
her
yeah.
mother would be there. And I think um, one of the things that talking with you today has given me a gift, and I appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome, Vickie. Can I tell you something else?
Sure.
So part of my giftedness, right, as being known as the energy linguist, is actually because I also have innate spiritual gifts of mediumship and clairvoyance. And
Mhm.
so when I said your husband is taking credit for the things you've done, he said that very literally. And I'm also hearing something else where he's saying that you tried to get rid of him, but you're never going to get rid of him. And so I do. I feel him so present with you. And I love how you just spoke of hearing that kind of encouragement to speak to her mother. Our capacity to tune into spirit really is that simple. It's just a matter of clearing out the overanalyzing and the overstimulation to just pause for a moment to connect with what's already there. I know myself that the reason Josh had to go through extreme lengths to come through to me was because the grief had clouded me so much. When
Yeah.
we're in grief and I sense it's happening with you and your husband shows up and you feel him there, we don't hear the message. What tends to happen, especially right out of the gates, is that we then get triggered to miss them. Like we feel them so vividly that it's like, all of that feeling of wishing they were physically present comes back. And that's the thing that, when we can pause to realize, okay, I'm going to try not to be triggered that way and to see that energy that's coming through as him presenting himself to me and the fact that he's actually here with me, we start to heal on a different level. And so I'm so grateful to give you anything that heals your heart because you're on a journey of helping others heal through the work you do. And it really is just such an honor to be a part of this conversation with you. It's real, it's real life. It's real life. It's what we
Yeah.
all will experience in our own unique storyline.
Yeah. Can I tell you a little bitty tiny story about my husband?
I would love it.
One of the things that he used to do that drove me crazy and lit me up at the same time, you know how that
Oh, yeah.
is I would be home cooking dinner, and we lived near the lake. We weren't very far from maybe 5, 10 minutes at the most, more like five, I guess. And he would come home. I would be right in the middle of cooking, and he'd say, oh my gosh, he said, the most beautiful sunset's about to happen. We need to go to the lake. So I'd turn everything off. We'd grab the kids, we'd get in the car, we'd go to the lake, we'd watch the sunset, and we'd be awed, ooh, and everything. We'd come back and then we'd start over. And so he did it a lot. And once he passed away, and we built our house, and he designed it, he built it, and he made sure that the front porch was a huge porch and that it faced the sunset. And so it was because his sunsets were his thing, right? And so when my daughter, especially when she was a lot younger, and we still do it today, we'd be driving down the road or something and see this amazing sunset. And I'd say, oh,
Mhm.
there's your dad.
Yeah, oh,
There's your
yeah.
dad.
Yeah.
And so it got to be our thing,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And what's really beautiful, and this is what I'm feeling from him and just seeing is that you ladies, you all are his sunset now. Like the thing he gets to watch is like your enjoyment of the thing he loved. It's like watching a sunset, watching you guys. And
Oh,
so it
nice.
really
Yeah.
is this beautiful full circle that we can continue to to be ignited by the love that they shared with us
Yeah.
while they were here. And so it's a journey. Like you said, it's times it's going to rise and feel, time is funny, right? Because as we
Hmm.
know, well, most of us know, I really like this kind of stuff, is that
Yeah, me
time
too.
isn't linear. And so what's really interesting is that time is so funny because it can feel like it was forever ago. And then in a moment, it can feel like it just happened just now in this
Yeah.
moment. And so we're constantly, it's funny, if people don't think we can time travel, I'm telling you, that is the essence of time traveling. Is
Yeah,
like we
I
really do
agree.
feel the rawness of that. And it makes this human experience quite wild. And we wouldn't have it any other way. Our soul actually came here to experience all of it. It's only in our human being that we're like, oh, avoid the pain, right? But our
Right.
soul actually is here for the delight and the dance of this experience. And so when we can try to dance with it and just accept the pain, and I don't mean surrender or I don't mean like
Work through it.
be defeated through it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but just to recognize that you can't avoid it.
Right.
Breathe through it, be in it, recognize that the pain is there because of the love. It really does start to allow us to just hold it less, right? Because when we resist it, we're actually contracting around it. Like if you think
Hmm.
about it,
If
Vickie,
you
if
don't deal
someone,
with it now, you'll deal with it bigger later.
yes, and when imagine if somebody punched you in the stomach, what would you do? Everything
Hmm.
holds, right? It contracts. And that's what happens when we feel the pain. We like hold, right? And so sometimes if we just have this willingness to be like, yeah, this hurts, we can let that move and not hold it. So yes, the pain's there, but the suffering's different. Suffering is the holding of the pain. And so
Yeah.
letting it
Choosing to
move.
keep it.
Right. And so there's nothing when we can not feel like there's anything wrong and just understand that we should be experiencing it, but not allow it to become our dominant experience. Recognize that joy and pain do exist at the same time. We do set
And
ourselves.
to recognize too, like you said earlier, that we're on our own timeline with that. And I know
Oh,
one of the
yeah.
things that I found was people would tell me, well, you should be doing better by now,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, how do you know how I'm
Right.
supposed to be
Oh, I
doing?
know. I know.
Yeah, yeah,
I heard it all. Mine was different. Vicki, mine was don't make any decisions until a year after they pass. And I'm like, okay, number one, I'm 29 years old, and none of you who are saying this to me have ever been widowed. Okay,
right,
so
right.
like I'm being called by something different and that was pulling me, but everybody wants, they want to protect you in some way or help you in some way. And again, everybody's journey is so unique. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if we both lost our husband, it doesn't matter if we both suffered the same challenges. Nobody else lost the person you lost.
Right.
Your children lost their father. Someone else may have lost their brother or their son. The puzzle piece that you lost is uniquely yours. And so it really holds a special place in your heart. And there's not a timeline for anything. It's an experience of life. We don't constantly have to measure where we're at.
Yeah,
We can just
really.
be in our,
Especially comparing it to someone else. That's the worst
I
thing we
know.
can do. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And one of my favorite books is Feelings Buried Alive Never Die. And so, I love that because it's a way to look at, if you've got grief or
Yeah.
anger or whatever you're feeling, you got to feel it and get through it. You don't
Yes.
stay immersed in it.
Yeah.
But if you don't, then it's going to be festering in your body somewhere.
You're right. Festering is the word, Vicky. So what I actually see when I look at people's energy is
Hmm.
that I actually can see where it's become stagnant or it's not moving. And our energy tells a whole story because that invisible energy of us, our spirit, isn't separate from our physical being. It's the same energy field. And one of the leading causes, and I'm not a doctor, this is my disclaimer, don't take medical advice from me. However, what I will say is that
I always love
energy
that.
that remains stagnant in our heart is a leading cause of actual physical chronic unwellness. So things that have to do with our lungs, breast cancer, heart failure, all of these things is because we're bottling it up. And the word you used was festered. That's exactly what's happening. It's like this unprocessed stagnant, like the vitality isn't there because we're not allowing the thing to move. And so it's interesting because I have treated clients from, I mean, children too, but like let's 18 into their 70s. I have clients across the globe, and it's really incredible to watch because the stories are all very unique, but the energetic patterns of the things we hold and what happens on account of it is all the same. And so really the more that we can kind of work and understand our being, we can process through that stuff and allow ourselves to be more vital. But you're right, we do have to process it on some level, in order for us to not experience the let's call it backlash, right? The physical manifestations of holding that pain for a prolonged amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I have loved this conversation so much. I want to talk to you even longer. Um, and I
It's
will
been
say when we
wonderful.
get off here, I want to talk to you for just a moment. But
Absolutely.
one of the things I want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to say is if there's something that you before you got on here or while we were talking that just came to you that I really want to get this out. I want to say this thing. And I haven't allowed you to, or I haven't asked you the right question or whatever is on your heart that you're wanting to get out. I mean, do that for us now. And I would love that.
Oh my God, Vickie, this has been such a beautiful organic conversation. I don't feel incomplete in any way. What I will say though is if there's one message that I can give your audience is that if they've aligned with your podcast and they're listening to this, I truly believe it's because there's something that they can move through and release within their own life so that they can claim their highest potential. I truly know that. I believe in the synchronization of all of the things. It is so blessed to behold and you watch like the mere, chance of people coming together.
Hmm.
And whatever it is that we think is impossible, I can promise every single listener here that it wouldn't be presented to you if you couldn't have the strength to face it and overcome it.
Yeah.
And we may not want to, right? And so there is a choice, right? We can stay in it and not move through it. But I do know that whether we like it or not, if we're faced with it, it's because we do have the power to overcome it. And so my biggest encouragement for anybody is that you're much stronger than you realize you are. And that you have more support than you could ever imagine. Angels and guidance and all of this unending, unconditional love that supports us on this journey, available to you. And at any given point, you can step in onto that path into your journey. So that is my hope. My hope in what I do and why I do it is because I want to help alleviate as much suffering on the planet as possible, and just help people to come into really living a life they deserve, and experiencing it on the level that they desire to. So
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
thanks.
And thank you so much for being here. And I feel very blessed to have had you here today
I
and
do too.
getting to know you, I will say.
Thank
And so for
you.
all my watchers and listeners, I'm going to end with the quote. And I swear I keep saying I'm going to find out who did this quote, but I keep hearing different people saying that this was so I'm just not even going to worry about it anymore. But the best way to predict the future is create it.
Mhm.
So we get to choose, and I ask, what are you choosing today? And with that, I will say thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Laura, for being such an amazing guest. And anybody, everybody, I will be putting all of her information in the description of this podcast. Wherever you see it, it's all going to be there, how you can connect with her, how you can connect with me. And until next time, I will see you soon. Mwah.